My name is Mara Ellison, 36 years old. There's a special kind of silence that settles right before a family implodes, the kind that doesn't come from peace, but from something rotting quietly underneath. And this past Christmas, I walked straight into it carrying a tray of roasted carrots and my 13-year-old son's heart in a gift box. We pulled up to my mom's house like we always did, tires crunching over the same patch of icy gravel, Evan in the passenger seat holding a carefully wrapped present on his lap. He'd picked the paper himself, little silver stars on a dark blue background. "She'll like it, right?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but his thumb kept tracing the corner of the box. "She'll like it," I said, even though I knew there was a good chance she wouldn't notice it at all. That's what I do. I lie in small ways to soften the edges of other people's behavior. When we walked inside, it was like stepping into a catalog. The house looked like a Pinterest board, curated by my younger sister, Lindsay, my mother's forever favorite and the unofficial creative director of every holiday. The air smelled like cinnamon and sugar cookies, but underneath it, I recognized the sharpness of cheap wine and scented candles trying too hard. Strings of warm fairy lights twisted around every banister, and the tree in the corner was so overloaded with ornaments, it looked like it might buckle under the weight of its own importance. There were photos everywhere, more than usual, enlarged canvases propped on shelves, framed prints on the wall. Lindsay in a matching pajama set with Mom and Haley. Haley in a tutu. Haley holding a bouquet of flowers. Haley with a medal around her neck. All the smiling faces of their perfect little unit. I scanned them automatically, looking for even a single shot of Evan and me, some proof that we existed outside of the contact list in my mother's phone. Nothing. We were ghosts in a house we used to call home. "Wow," Evan murmured, his eyes landing on a huge framed picture of Haley in mid-leap, suspended in the air like she lived on a stage. "They really like pictures." "Yeah," I said, "they really do." Lindsay's voice floated in from the kitchen, bright and bossy. "The wine goes on the sideboard, Mom, not by the stove. Oh my God, that plate is chipped. Don't use that one." She was directing everything, as always. My mom fluttered around her like a nervous moth, adjusting napkins and pretending she'd thought of all of this herself. Haley had colonized the living room. Glitter, ribbons, stray ballet shoes, a feathered headpiece tossed over the arm of the sofa like a crown she'd outgrown. She sat cross-legged on the rug, scrolling on her phone, perfectly at ease in a space that had been designed to orbit her. Evan hovered near me on the couch, shoulders slightly hunched, clutching the gift he'd brought her. "Go on," I whispered. "Give it to her before things get crazy." He nodded and walked over, his sneakers making almost no sound on the hardwood floor. "Here," he said quietly, holding out the box. "Merry Christmas." She took it without looking at him. No eye contact, no smile, just a practiced motion of accepting yet another present. She tore open the paper and lifted the lid. Inside was a necklace he'd saved up for, a small silver pendant shaped like a star. I'd driven him to 3 different stores before he found the one he wanted. Haley stared at it for all of 2 seconds, shrugged, and let the necklace drop back into the box. "Thanks, I guess," she said, her tone so flat it barely counted as gratitude. Then she turned to Evan, her expression suddenly serious, almost rehearsed. "Grandma told me you and your mom are just a phase in this family," she said, like she was quoting a weather report. "Like something we'll grow out of." The words hit the room like a glass dropping in slow motion. Lindsay laughed first. Loud, sharp, that particular laugh she uses when something is mean, but she wants everyone to pretend it's just a joke. "Oh my God, Haley," she sputtered. "You can't just say everything Grandma tells you." My mother didn't laugh. She didn't gasp. She didn't correct her. She didn't even look up from the dish she was pretending to arrange on the dining table. If she heard it at all, she decided in that split second to do nothing. To protect nothing. Evan froze. His hand hovered uselessly in the air for a moment, then dropped to his side. He glanced back at me, confusion and something like shame flickering across his face, as if he'd done something wrong by simply existing. There was a version of me that, in another lifetime, would have sprung into action, asked questions, tried to smooth it over, gently reminded everyone we were all family here. I could feel that old instinct twitching, desperate to patch the hole before the cold poured in. I didn't let her take over. I didn't ask who said what or why. I didn't force Haley to apologize. I didn't beg my mother with my eyes to step in. I stood up, Evan, I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. Get your coat. He blinked. Now? Now. Lindsay's laughter died out. Whoa, Scarlett, what are you doing? She said, using my name like a weapon, like I was the one crossing a line. We're leaving, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I simply walked over to the couch, picked up my purse, and watched my son quietly slip his coat back on. Haley's gift lay open on the floor, the necklace still inside the box, forgotten. Mom? My mother said weakly, like she was the confused party here, like she hadn't set this tone for years. What's going on? I met her eyes just once. There was a flicker there, guilt, maybe, but it disappeared so fast I could have imagined it. Nothing, I said, absolutely nothing. That's the problem. We walked out without another word. Behind us, I heard Lindsay say something under her breath, the clink of glasses being adjusted, the soundtrack of a holiday they would continue without us. We didn't speak on the drive home. The streets were mostly empty, Christmas lights blurring past the windshield like someone had smeared color across the night. Evan stared out the window, his reflection small and tired in the glass. Halfway to our apartment, he finally spoke. Is it because of me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Like, are we the phase because I'm weird or something? My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I swallowed the rising heat in my throat. No, I said. It's not because of you. It's because they don't know how to be decent. That's not your fault. It's not mine either. He nodded slowly, like he wanted to believe me, but the words Haley had planted were already taking root. When we got back to our place, he went straight to his room and sat on the edge of his bed, still holding the shredded wrapping paper he'd picked out for her. I leaned on the doorframe and watched him for a moment, this sweet, quiet kid who had tried so hard to give something meaningful to someone who didn't see him at all. That was when it hit me how deep it had gone. This wasn't just about years of favoritism and little microcuts. This was systemic, deliberate, and I had let it continue because I didn't want to be the one who ruined Christmas. I went to the kitchen and turned on the tap. Hot water, a sink full of dishes that weren't really dirty, but gave my hands something to do. The apartment felt strangely peaceful in the aftermath, like the silence here was honest for once. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my mom. Don't forget the Christmas bonus. Hope work's been good this year. That was it. No mention of Haley's words. No. Did something happen? No concern about Evan. No attempt at an apology or even a clumsy justification. Just her yearly reminder that I covered half her expenses and paid for her granddaughter's ballet life. That was what I was to her, not a daughter, a line item. I stared at the message for a long time, water running over my hands until it turned lukewarm. Something in my chest went very, very still. The part of me that always rushed to excuse her, to find a way to make it my fault, went quiet. I dried my hands, picked up my phone, and typed 2 words. Mary cut off. I hit send. No explanation, no paragraph, no nervous follow-up. Then I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, set it face down on the counter, and exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. In the bedroom, Evan shifted on the mattress, the springs creaking softly. Outside, the world kept doing what it always does. Cars passing, distant sirens, someone laughing on the street. Inside our little apartment, it felt like the first domino had fallen. They just didn't know yet that I was the one who pushed it. By morning, the silence was over. My phone lit up like a malfunctioning slot machine, call after call, each one flashing a name I used to associate with comfort, but now only brought a heavy, exhausted ache. First my mom, then Lindsay, then an aunt I hadn't heard from in months. Some left voicemails wrapped in fake warmth. Others didn't bother pretending. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I made coffee in the quiet kitchen, the kind of quiet that felt earned, not given. Evan patted in wearing yesterday's hoodie, rubbing his eyes. He didn't ask about the calls. He just sat at the table and picked at a leftover croissant. You okay? I asked softly. He shrugged. Are they mad? Oh, they're furious, I said, keeping my tone light for his sake. But that's not your problem. He nodded slowly, as if he was still trying to believe it. Just as I took my first sip, my phone buzzed again. A long voicemail from my mom. I put it on speaker, letting her voice spill into the room like fog. Scarlett, honey, come on. Haley didn't mean it. Lindsay was tired. You're blowing things out of proportion. Family's all we've got. Life's too short to... She paused, then lowered her voice into the tone she used when she wanted something. Anyway, was there some issue with the Christmas bonus this year? Just wondering since I haven't seen it come through yet. There it was, the real reason for the call. Evan lifted his eyes to mine. He heard it too. I wished he hadn't. I ended the voicemail without listening to the rest. They still thought this was temporary. They still thought I'd cave. The old Scarlett would have. But I wasn't her anymore. I set my coffee down, pulled my laptop forward, and logged into the bank account I'd been quietly feeding for nearly a decade. The account listed under my mother's name but linked entirely to mine. The account I created the year my father died, when she cried about bills and drowning and how she just needed a little help. What started as 6 months turned into 10 years. The balance wasn't huge anymore, but it had been steady, every paycheck, a little more. Money she relied on so fully, she stopped acknowledging it came from me at all. I selected the entire balance, transferred it to my personal account, initiated closure. The bank asked if I was sure. For the first time in my life regarding my mother, I didn't hesitate. I clicked yes. The old version of me, the one who kept everyone afloat, felt like a stranger now. Next, Haley's ballet tuition. $400 a month, like clockwork. A temporary help during one of Lindsay's many rough patches that somehow became permanent. Evan used to dance there too, before the director made it clear who the real star was. Before my son, age 10, whispered, "Mom, I don't think they want me here." I revoked my card from the conservatory's autopay and sent a short email. "Please terminate recurring payments effective immediately." The reply came fast. "Payment declined. Please update your card." Almost immediately after, my phone buzzed. Lindsay. The text read, "Did you cancel Haley's tuition? Seriously, what is wrong with you?" I didn't answer. Another text arrived seconds later, a screenshot of the declined tuition with 17 exclamation points and, "You're punishing a child." Then, "You're being dramatic." Then, "God, you're jealous." That one made me laugh, out loud. Jealous? Of what? Of being erased? Of being the family's designated wallet? I still didn't reply. Instead, I called the dancewear store where I'd kept an open credit line for Haley's costumes. Another forgotten favor turned permanent. I closed the account with a single sentence. That's when Lindsay switched tactics. She started calling. Once, twice, then from a different number. I ignored the first two, but on the third, I picked up. Not to argue, not to explain, but because I wanted her to hear how calm I was. She didn't even say hello. "You're disgusting," she spat. "Haley is devastated. Do you understand what you've done? She's worked all year for that showcase. Mom has been crying for days." I said nothing. Silence made her unravel. "You're doing this because you're bitter," she continued. "Because you've always been second. You hate that Mom and I are close and you're just there." That one hit. Not because it was true, but because she said it so casually, like it was a fact, like that had been my assigned role all along. Still, I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. When I didn't respond, she hung up. Mom texted again that night. "We need to talk." I didn't respond, because I already knew. Now that the money was gone, now that the strings were cut, they would scramble. And when people who rely on you scramble, their true motives spill out. I wasn't planning to tell anyone in the extended family. That wasn't the point. I wasn't trying to cause drama. I wasn't crafting some moment of revenge. I was cutting the veins where I'd been bleeding for years. But then my cousin Jamie texted, "Hey, random question. Did something weird happen at Grandma's on Christmas?" I ignored it at first, but she followed up. "Lindsay's been telling people you lost it, that you stormed out over a joke Haley made, that Evan's been having issues and maybe you're just overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. That was the word they chose for me. Not erased, not excluded, not hurt. Overwhelmed. Something in me snapped. Not angry, not unstable, just done. I called Jamie. I don't call people, not if I can avoid it. But this time, I needed my voice to be heard. When she picked up, she sounded surprised. "Scarlett, are you okay?" So I told her everything. Everything I had swallowed for years. How Haley called us a phase. How Lindsay laughed. How my mother stayed silent. How there were no photos of Evan or me in that house. How I'd paid for nearly everything. Mortgage, ballet, costumes. How Evan looked at the gift he brought like he wished he could vanish along with it. Jamie didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Scarlett, no one knows this. You should tell the family." I wasn't the type to blast my life into group chats. I'm a leave quietly, heal privately kind of person. But then I remembered Lindsay's voice. "You're just there. A placeholder, a phase, forgettable." So I did something I never imagined I would do. I wrote an email. Not emotional, not vengeful, detailed. Dates, payments, the Christmas comment word for word, the scholarship, the years of quiet exclusion, and a photo of Evan holding the gift he bought, still unopened when we left. I sent it to everyone, every aunt, every uncle, every cousin, every relative who ever asked why Evan wasn't at Thanksgiving. Then I closed my laptop and walked away. The replies started slow, then faster. Some shocked, some apologetic, some angry, at them, not me. But there was one reply I'll never forget, forwarded from Aunt Denise, a message my mother sent in September. It said, "Scarlett's always difficult. If we include her, she makes everything about her. It's easier if she just doesn't come. And Haley gets uncomfortable around Evan." Uncomfortable. My son, 13, quiet, soft-spoken. The most gentle child in a room full of loud adults. That was the moment I realized the truth. I hadn't been excluded. I had been managed, edited out, rewritten as the problem. And now that the real story was out, they were about to lose something far more valuable to them than my money. Their image. The next morning, my inbox looked like it had been struck by lightning. Email chains splitting into subthreads, replies forwarding to replies, cousins texting me screenshots of messages they never should have seen in the first place. It was chaos, messy, unfiltered, revealing. The kind of chaos that only happens when a family realizes the version of events they were sold doesn't match the one now staring back at them in writing. I hadn't planned on reading every message, but curiosity pulled me in like gravity. Aunt Denise wrote, "I didn't know any of this. I'm so sorry." Uncle Mark wrote, "Maybe she didn't remove herself. Maybe she was erased." Even quiet cousin Ben chimed in. "I remember Lindsay saying not to invite you to the barbecue last summer. Said it was easier that way. Is that true?" It was surreal. For years, I thought I was the one drifting away. Now it was clear. They'd been pushing me off the edge in slow motion, with sugar-coated excuses and carefully crafted stories. But the most telling responses weren't the ones sent to me. They were the ones people forwarded because they were done keeping secrets. One message from Lindsay, sent to a cousin I barely spoke to, said, "Scarlett brings weird energy. Honestly, it's stressful when she's around. Mom gets tense, Haley gets uncomfortable, and it becomes a whole thing. Better if she skips." Weird energy, uncomfortable, a whole thing. Funny how the people who break you always find language to make it look like your fault. And then, another forward from Aunt Denise, a message from my mother. "Scarlett's difficult, always has been. If we include her, she makes it about her feelings. It's exhausting." I sat on the edge of my bed holding my phone, reading that line over and over again, as if repetition would dull the blade. Feelings, that was my crime. Not rage, not drama. Feelings. The people who spent years benefiting from my labor, my money, my silence, had repurposed my humanity into a flaw. And now their story was falling apart. I thought that would be enough to satisfy whatever ache had lived under my ribs for years. But 2 hours later, my phone rang again, this time with a name that made my breath catch. "Haley!" A video call request. I didn't answer. A text came right after. "Why did you stop helping me?" Not hi, not I'm sorry, not I didn't know. Just, why did you stop helping me? The entitlement was generational, handed down like china plates. I stared at her message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I imagined explaining it all. The years of favoritism, the things she didn't understand yet, the way her mother's laughter had cut deeper than anything she said. I imagined telling her that love without respect isn't love at all. But none of those thoughts were meant for a 12-year-old. So I put my phone down and walked away. A few minutes later, Evan wandered into the room. He saw the message on my screen, read it quietly, then sat next to me. "She texted me too," he said after a moment. "I didn't respond either." I turned to him. "How do you feel?" He shrugged, but his eyes said more. "Tired," he whispered. "I'm just tired of trying." It broke me a little, but it also stitched something back together. Because I realized then, he wasn't choosing to walk away because of me. He was choosing himself. And that meant everything. We spent the afternoon at the park, letting cold December air bite our cheeks while we kicked around a soccer ball. It felt normal, simple, cleansing in a way Christmas never had. But the world has a way of never letting things end cleanly. When we got home, an email was waiting for me. The subject line, "Family isn't always easy, but it's everything." From my mother. Against every ounce of judgment I possessed, I opened it. It was a masterpiece of self-preservation. Paragraph after paragraph about how she raised 2 daughters alone after our father passed, how she sacrificed everything, how she had always kept the door open for me, even when I chose distance, how family requires grace, patience, and maturity. Then came the part about me, written as if she were a saint grieving a prodigal daughter. Some people carry old wounds and turn them into walls. I've tried everything, but when someone removes themselves, you can only hold the door open so long before it becomes a burden. Burden. There it was again. The word she wielded like a scalpel, clean and practiced. For a split second, it cut. Not because it was true, but because it was familiar. But before I could process anything, the replies started rolling in, this time directly on the same email thread. Uncle Mark hit reply all. Or maybe she didn't remove herself. Maybe she was erased. Aunt Denise replied a minute later. I haven't seen Scarlett invited to anything for 2 years. So who exactly closed the door? Cousin Ben added. And Lindsay literally sent half the family an email saying not to invite her last summer. Just saying. Each reply chipped away at my mother's narrative, the one she'd spent years curating with soft lies and sweet tone. My phone buzzed nonstop as relatives quietly unsubscribed from the chain, not siding with me, not attacking her, just stepping out of the drama entirely. But sometimes silence is a verdict. That night, Aunt Janine called me. No hello, just, I didn't know. I really didn't. I believed everything they said about you. Her voice cracked. Not from guilt, but from resignation. The weight of realizing you've been lied to for years. I didn't know what to say, so I said the truest thing I could. It's okay, I didn't know either. The next morning, the fallout spread farther. New Year's brunch, usually hosted by 2 families who acted as the social glue, was suddenly scaled back. Jamie texted, they didn't want to deal with your mom and Lindsay pretending everything's fine. That wasn't loyalty to me, that was exhaustion with them. But the biggest hit came from the dance world, Lindsay's Kingdom. Jamie was at the studio when Lindsay tried to secure a payment plan since the scholarship and tuition were gone. When the office manager explained politely that there were no exceptions this year, Lindsay's voice rose sharply. She's punishing a child, she snapped loud enough for everyone to hear. My sister is vindictive and unstable. This is jealousy, plain and simple. One of the dance moms, someone who had received my email and connected dots on her own, turned around and said, you should be ashamed. I used to admire you as a parent. Not anymore. Lindsay left early that day. Haley didn't perform in the winter showcase. The scholarship board removed her name from the upcoming review list. I didn't ask for that. I didn't even know until later. But sometimes consequences make their way home without your involvement. That night, when the house was finally quiet, another envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, no glittery stickers, just a plain white card addressed to Evan. Inside, one sentence. You're still welcome here if you change your mind. I stared at it, feeling heat crawl up my spine. Evan stood beside me, his jaw tightening. Why would they say that? He asked. They never wanted me there when I actually was, said. I handed him the card. What do you want to do with it? He didn't hesitate. Burn it. So we did, in the kitchen sink, watching the flames curl the edges until the ink disappeared. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't symbolic, it was necessary. Because I realized something as the smoke curled up. My mother wasn't trying to apologize, she was trying to bait a crack in the door. Not for me, for him. And she had underestimated the one thing I'd done right. I raised a child who knew his worth long before I learned mine. I thought the email would be the peak of the storm, the moment everything spilled out. Everyone took sides, and then eventually it would all settle into a new, colder shape. But I underestimated 2 things. My mother's ability to reinvent herself when cornered. How quickly a family's loyalty evaporates when the truth finally becomes undeniable. For 2 days after Evan burned the card, I allowed myself to believe the worst was over. Calls were tapering off. Lindsay had gone silent. An ominous silence, but silence nonetheless. Mom had retreated. No new emails, no passive-aggressive texts. It almost felt like a ceasefire. Then Jamie texted me a photo. Have you seen this? It was a page from her church bulletin. There, printed in soft gold letters, Women of Strength, honoring mothers who inspire generations. And beneath it, my mother's name. The description read like fan fiction. A devoted mother who raised 2 daughters alone, guiding them through hardship and joy. A pillar of strength who now pours her love into her granddaughter with grace. I laughed. I actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that startled even me. Jamie added, she's giving a speech this Saturday. Of course she was. When the real story crumbled, she built a new one. She always had a talent for that. My mother learned early in life that if you say something with enough conviction, people will repeat it for you. I told Jamie to ignore it. let them have their little luncheon, let her bask in applause from strangers who didn't know the difference between performance and reality. But Mom wasn't done. She wanted an audience bigger than a church basement. The next morning, my inbox chimed. Subject: family isn't always easy, but it's everything. I didn't want to open it. I did anyway. The email was long, polished, painstakingly edited, a PR release disguised as maternal reflection. She wrote about resilience, sacrifice, raising daughters without complaint, opening her home to the next generation, being hurt by someone who has chosen distance. At one point, she said, "Some people turn old wounds into walls. I've tried to keep the door open for years, but holding it open alone becomes a burden." There it was again, burden, the word she used when she wanted to guilt you while sounding noble. I felt it land in my chest like a cold stone. But the universe must have decided she'd wielded it long enough. Because 10 minutes later, my uncle hit reply all. Or maybe she didn't remove herself. Maybe she was erased. I blinked, reread it twice. Then Aunt Denise replied, "Funny, I don't remember Scarlett being invited to anything in the last 2 years. If the door was open, no one told her." Then Cousin Ben. "And didn't Lindsay send half the family a message saying not to invite her last summer? I still have it." One by one, the thread shifted. My mother responded to none of them. But Lindsay did. "Oh my God," she wrote. "You're all buying into her victim routine? Scarlett loves drama. She's making us look abusive because she's jealous of Haley. Don't enable her." She forgot she was speaking to people who received my original email, with timestamps, receipts, and literal bank statements. Uncle Mark responded with, "Jealous of what, Lindsay? Being excluded? Paying your bills?" That was the moment the thread died, quietly, abruptly, because the truth had stopped being subtle. People began unsubscribing, muting the chain, stepping out, not because they chose me, but because they suddenly realized how long they'd been fed curated half-truths. And then came the blow that shook Lindsay's kingdom. Jamie called me that afternoon, breathless. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "I was at the studio today." She described Lindsay at the front desk, trying to negotiate re-enrollment for Haley. Now that the scholarship and tuition were gone, her voice got increasingly shrill. "She's punishing a child," Lindsay shouted. "How is that fair? This is jealousy." One of the dance moms, a quiet woman I recognized only vaguely from holiday photos, turned around. She said, "Your daughter got opportunities other kids didn't because someone else paid for them. Maybe instead of blaming your sister, you should be thanking her." Lindsay went silent, shut down. She grabbed Haley's coat and left early. Word spread quickly. By the next morning, Haley's winter showcase slot was removed. The scholarship review committee quietly took her name off their shortlist. Nobody blamed the kid. They blamed the adults behind her. And I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not triumph, not vengeance. Just release. A sense of gravity loosening. Like someone had unclipped a weight from my shoulders and it fell, finally, where it belonged. But the fallout wasn't over. That night, I heard Evan call me from the hallway. "Mom," he said, holding an envelope, "this came for me." Same handwriting as before. Same plain card. No return address. Inside, "You're still welcome here if you change your mind." I stared at it, at the casual manipulation, at the attempt to bypass me entirely. This time I didn't decide what happened next. Evan did. He held the card over the kitchen sink, lit a match, and dropped it in. I watched the flames curl at the edges of the paper. "They didn't make me feel welcome when I was actually there," he said softly. "Why would I want to go now?" Something inside me broke. Something else healed. He wasn't choosing me out of loyalty. He was choosing himself out of truth. And I realized more clearly than ever, this wasn't just family unraveling. This was generational cleansing. We weren't losing them. We were finally releasing them. I thought things would cool down after the second burned card, that familiar handwriting curling into ash as Evan watched without blinking. I thought the silence that followed would be the final chapter, the last frayed thread snapping in a story that had already unraveled. But family endings are rarely clean. They happen slowly in waves, with people waking up at different times, realizing truths they avoided for years. And that's exactly what happened next. It started with late-night messages, quiet ones that didn't ask for details, just clarity. My cousin from Arizona, someone I hadn't seen since Evan was in diapers, sent me a Facebook DM. "Did I miss something? Your email? It doesn't match what your mom and Lindsay have been saying." Then a voicemail from Aunt Lila, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry." Then Ben again. "She told us you didn't want to come to things, that you were too busy, that Evan didn't like being around people." And the one that hit me hardest, a text from my uncle. You weren't the first person they pushed out, just the first one to say it out loud. It turns out the truth doesn't need volume, it just needs oxygen. Once the first person breathed it in, the others followed. Screenshots circulated, old messages resurfaced, family group chats that were once bustling turned into ghost towns. New Year's brunch, the event Lindsay lived for, was canceled with a vague scheduling conflict. But Jamie told me the truth. Half the family said they're done pretending around your mom and Lindsay. They're embarrassed, Scarlett. Embarrassed. The same people who once believed every story told about me now felt uneasy around the storytellers themselves. That was new and overdue. Mom tried to salvage things. Of course she did. According to Jamie, she called everyone who still picked up the phone. She's making me look bad. She twisted everything. She's always been sensitive. And then the line she saved for when she wanted to break me without raising her voice. She may be drinking again. I haven't had a drink in 7 years. That accusation didn't hurt the way she intended. It just confirmed what I already knew. When facts fail, she goes for character. When character isn't enough, she goes for history. When history doesn't hold, she rewrites it. But this time, people didn't buy it. Aunt Gina texted. She sounded like she was spiraling. I think she knows she went too far. For once, my mother's narrative wasn't the loudest in the room. Then came the unraveling in Lindsay's world, the place she guarded like a kingdom. Jamie overheard her at the studio again, arguing with the director. Apparently, she tried to enroll Haley under a payment plan, but when it fell apart, Lindsay's voice cracked loud enough for everyone to hear. My sister is unstable. She's punishing my child. This is jealousy. Everyone knows she hates us. But one of the dance moms, a quiet woman with sharp intuition, interrupted. No, she said in front of the entire lobby. Some of us actually know what she did for you. For years. You owe her an apology. The room fell silent. Lindsay didn't. She stormed out with Haley trailing behind, her coat dragging on the floor like a shadow she couldn't shake. The winter showcase came and went without Haley. Her scholarship review was quietly withdrawn. Her name no longer appeared on the talent development lists. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't smile. I felt nothing. Sometimes peace looks like nothing. A few days later, another envelope arrived for Evan. Same handwriting. Same manipulative softness. You're still welcome here if you change your mind. It was the emotional equivalent of a fishing hook, cast out without bait, assuming someone would bite, just because they were used to swallowing the line. I held the envelope out to Evan. What do you want to do with it? He didn't hesitate this time. Burn it, he said again, his voice steady. So we did, together, in the kitchen. Watching the flames consume the words meant to wound him into returning. Later that night, Evan curled up on the couch beside me, scrolling through photos of cabins and beaches. Can we skip the usual spring break this year? He asked. No relatives, just us, somewhere quiet. Anywhere you want, I said, anywhere at all. And I meant it. Because for the first time in my adult life, quiet didn't feel like isolation. It felt like safety. We spent the next weekend exploring towns upstate, the kind with small bookstores, old libraries, and local coffee shops where everyone knew each other's names. A place where Evan said he could see himself biking to school, maybe joining a club without worrying who would laugh. We even looked at houses, not big ones, not expensive ones, just ones that felt like they had room for breathing. Driving home, snow drifting across the windshield, Evan said something I'll never forget. I like this version of our life. Not new, not perfect, just ours. And I realized then, cutting someone off doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like guilt, like doubt, like grief. It feels like loss, even when what you're losing is the thing that was hurting you. Freedom is quieter. It sneaks in slowly, through peaceful mornings, through nights without dread, through the sound of your child laughing without tension in his shoulders. It took me months to recognize it, but once I did, I knew. You don't owe anyone your peace. You build it. You protect it. And when they try to walk back in with muddy feet, you leave the door locked. Let them tell whatever story they want now. Let the charity luncheons honor imaginary versions of my mother. Let Lindsay sigh on social media about people who twist things. I won't hear it. I won't reply. I won't explain. Because the story is mine now, and it ends here.